Welcome back to Analysis, where we've been investigating the situation across Syria and Iraq. In the first half, we focused on events in Iraq and the rise of ISIS and its declaration of a caliphate. In this half, we're looking at Syria. Staying with me from the first half of the programme are Professor Bill Bowring, who's from Birkbeck, University of London, and Dr. Rebwa Fattah, a Middle East analyst and director of the Middle East Consultancy Services. Joining us are Hatem Al-Sibahi from the Syrian Social Club in the UK, and on the line is Bilal Abdul Karim, who's a journalist and a filmmaker who's documented the resistance fighters' efforts against President Bashar al-Assad. Welcome to the programme. Bill, in the first half there, we were just beginning to look at the sort of extension. Now, presumably ISIS have been strengthened by just the resources, military and financial, that they gained in the advance in Iraq and are now redeploying in Syria.
Well, I'd say that this has further split the opposition in Syria very decisively, of course. And the fact that ISIS now controls significant oil resources in Iraq has got to affect the situation. I'd like to add another factor, if I may, which is that I strongly suspect that one of the main reasons that Assad has survived for 3 years now is that he is seen by many of the minorities in Syria as the only person who can protect them. Because the real disaster in Iraq, a major disaster since the invasion and occupation, has been for the minorities, many of them, Christians, Turkmens, many others as well, actually, have really suffered. And I strongly suspect that people in Syria look at that disaster for the minorities there. And that's why Assad, you know, for all his many extreme faults, is still there.
Dr. Fattah, ISIS were quite careful about how they dealt with the Kurds in Iraq, but not so in Syria, where there seems to be now quite intense fighting between the Kurdish area and the ISIS forces.
Yeah, that's right. I'm not sure they were kind to Kurds in Iraq, but I think they stopped where the Kurdish region started.
Yeah. I mean, they were careful in a sense.
They were very careful because
yeah.
maybe they didn't want military, they didn't have the troops to do that. But obviously, they are very keen to consolidate the eastern part of Syria into their so-called state, Islamic State. And that's why they've been fighting Kurds. And that's really another problem that the conflict is escalating because the PKK, the Kurdish political group, and also they have a military wing from Syria, have a very long route in Syria. Their leader was there and so on. They started from there. So they now saying they're going to protect Kurds in Syria. So if you like, now there's a Turkish element to it. And adding at one point to the professor, I think ISIS maybe in Syria military is stronger, but I think maybe they lost the moral ground because what they did in Iraq to the minorities, maybe people are scared of them, or people fear they do the same, especially to the minorities.
What do you think is going to happen now with Turkish foreign policy? Because the Turks obviously don't like the PKK and they don't like the Kurds, but they don't like ISIS very much either. So is Turkish foreign policy in a bit of a mess?
It's really strange. I mean, from myself monitoring the region, Turkey has been rather calm about the situation, and if you read the news, the ISIS also released their diplomats and their truck drivers from Mosul. I mean, this is where the conspiracy theory comes to it. I mean, I would have expected Turkey to be, especially a Turkish state, they are very careful about their borders, about their foreign policy. I would expect Turkey to be more alert. For example, bringing troops on the border with Iraq and so on. But they have been very relaxed about that. So
they're letting it happen.
Yes, and it seems to me that it's not that much concern. So if there is something in the background, I don't really know. But obviously now the Kurdish autonomous region in Syria is the reality, and I would be very surprised if ISIS can get rid of that.
Let me bring Bilal in. Welcome to the programme. Has the extension of ISIS-controlled territory in Iraq and the resources that they got from that extension, has that put them in a more powerful position vis-à-vis other groups that are fighting Assad? Hello, Bilal? Okay, we've lost him for the moment. We'll try and re-establish that connection. Let me put that question to you, Hatem. Has it made ISIS now more powerful in relationship to the other resistance groups?
No, ISIS is more powerful, yes, but let me comment on what I heard here from the professor. I mean, the point is minorities and majorities. We never grow up in Syria. We understand what is going on the Syrian ground. On the Syrian soil, we believe ISIS is a result of intelligence work. After the failure of the FSA, the failure of Al-Nusra Front, and even the Islamic Army, now everything, whoever, let's say intelligent, whoever want to topple President Bashar Assad is pushing towards ISIS, arming ISIS. ISIS today can take oil to Turkey, transport oil through Turkey, export it from the port south to Israel or somewhere or some other countries. ISIS fighters lost in Kasab area with the Turkish border, and the fighters were treated in Turkish hospitals. So this is states behind this. The ISIS is not a normal little group who gained arm and gained little money and become a terrorist. This is a group is being backed by various intelligence, and let me say, it could be also infiltrated by the Syrian intelligence, because this is an intelligent war, war on the Syrian soil.
Let's name names then, because I mean it's a fair enough point to say that.
I'll name them. The head of the snake is United States. After that, who will go around in that? But that policy, there is Britain, mainly France. Turkey has an interest on it. Saudi Arabia has to. Let me emphasize on this point. Just
we've got Bilal
point.
back on the line now, so just let me put the question I put originally to you, Bilal. Has the resources that ISIS got out of the advance in Iraq, has it now made it more powerful in Syria vis-a-vis other resistance groups?
Well, of course, the resources that they've gotten have upped their military strength. In addition to that, it's also an issue wherein their troops have been galvanized by some of the events that were previously going on in Iraq. But it's an interesting piece of something to note, that a lot of them do have question marks over their heads right now, because they were expecting for the sweep into Iraq to continue, and it didn't. So they're just a little bit curious as to what's going on there, because information doesn't flow back and forth that much. So it's kind of like an ebb and flow situation there in terms of their military strength, because their military strength is directly tied to the spirits of the fighters that are there as well.
Let me just put to you the point that was raised. I don't know whether you were back on the line in time to hear it, but the point that was raised by Hatem here in the studio, that ISIS is, I think he was suggesting, mainly the creation of foreign states. Is that how you read it, or has it got a larger kind of indigenous base than that, shall we say?
I think, I'm really sorry, but I think you zoned out just a little bit. I did not catch that last part.
Hatem was suggesting here in the studio that ISIS is predominantly the kind of proxy of foreign states, rather than having a kind of indigenous base of its own. How do you read that?
I'm sorry, but I just heard that ISIS would dominate something, but I didn't quite catch the rest of it.
Let me just try one more time, and then we may have to try and re-establish a better link with you. But the suggestion here in the studio was that ISIS is predominantly the creature of foreign states. Do you think that's true? No, it looks as if we're going to lose that line. What do you think, Bill? Do you think that...
No, I think ISIS, as I said earlier on, is a brand. I think a very effective brand. Their flag in particular, I don't think there's many of them, as a matter of fact. And I think I agree totally with you in the sense that they are a cat's paw, I think. Of course, I think in Iraq what is significant is the Ba'ath and the secularists and many people who don't like the regime in Baghdad, of course, and don't want to have sheer domination of the entire region. So I think that is what is significant. Of course, in Syria, it is much more complicated altogether, as a matter of fact. But, I just...
Do you think they're the Americans' cat's paw? I mean, Hatim, I think, was suggesting...
Of course, ISIS are not doing what the Americans want, but I'm sure the Americans have very strong interests there. And of course, the Americans, for a long time, have been trying to overthrow Assad. And the Americans must be extremely frustrated.
And ISIS driving Houthis at the moment.
Really, absolutely. So, you know, perhaps the Assad's enemy is the Americans' friend in some sense, but they're not actually the Americans' friend at all. I'm very interested in what's been said about Turkey, as a matter of fact, because Turkey is in a relatively strong position, and Erdogan in particular is in rather a strong position politically. And I think Erdogan is quite prepared to allow these things to play out in both Iraq and in Syria, as a matter of fact. And I think Erdogan can live with a strong Kurdistan in Iraq. I think he could quite possibly live with an autonomous Kurdistan in Syria, as a matter of fact. And things are actually evolving in Turkey in relation to the Kurds as we speak. But, you know...
Dr. Fano, we're slightly speaking about in two different cases, though, here. You know, it's one thing to say, as Bill has done, that the Turks are happy to see it happen. Maybe the Americans are happy to see it happen. That's a slightly different case than being a cat's paw, which gives you the sense that they are directly controlling them.
I mean, probably the way we approach ISIS, which state or which regime in the region interested in ISIS? Or forget about all these insurgency that break in that area, which stops the influence of Iran. I mean, we like it or not, ISIS, it wasn't the only group, but it was like the most effective group that undermined the Maliki government and effectively undermining the Iranian project in Iraq. And now, Maliki, I believe, if he survives, it will be a miracle. I think he has to go, despite all the votes, 1 billion votes he received, because he lost legitimacy. He was the commander of the armed forces. He is the head of the executive power in Iraq, and he couldn't rule the country. He couldn't unite the country. So he has to go. So it means the Iranian project in Iraq is much weaker. And maybe from that Shia-dominated Iraq, I'm using these terms very loosely, that maybe the Kurdish state would evolve, which we already heard. So I would say you could see that a proxy war between the Shia regional powers and Sunni regional powers, whoever, I mean, you can name them anyway. So if you see it that way, I mean, that's really not far from what happened in Taliban in Afghanistan. The main problem would be that after ISIS itself became, ISIS with other groups, ETL, became a power itself, became from a military power, evolved to become a political power. I mean, we have seen in many other places in the Middle East. Then it will be difficult because now the genie out of the bottle and you create the Frankenstein monster, and what do you do with that? I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, I think we have eventually re-established a connection with Bilal. Bilal, can you hear us okay?
I'm here.
Ah, brilliant. Okay. Well, the question was, and I'm sure that after the pent-up demand, now viewers must be wanting to know what your answer is. So, how much do you believe that ISIS are a direct proxy of foreign powers, and how much do they have a kind of base of their own?
My experience with them is as follows: the ordinary membership of the group, I do not believe has any idea, any connection to any type of foreign power.
I agree with him.
The upper echelon of the group is something that I cannot comment on because I don't like to comment on something that I don't have certainty about. However, what I can say is that the work that ISIS is doing is working against the Islamic project of its membership, that they say that they want to have an Islamic state. An Islamic state does not mean to rule a smoking ruin. And I think that a lot of their members know that and they understand that. But they've given a blind leadership to a blind allegiance to their leadership, hoping that they have some type of end game out of what's going on now, because their ordinary leadership are not really a part of a lot of the atrocities that they're doing. Some of them are, some of them are not. But can I say that the group in its entirety is a proxy of foreign governments. I don't like to say that which I don't have certainty about, but I can certainly say that their membership is working very much against the very ideals that they say that they want to bring about. Now, is that due in part to allegiance of their upper echelon leadership to foreign government agencies? I'm going to have to leave that for somebody else to.
Okay, thanks very much. Do you think that the Assad regime is still in place?
Assad government.
Well, I mean the regime, I suppose, but it's got a divided opposition, which is always a good thing if you're trying to fight down a resistance.
That's the best gift for us.
Yes, exactly. But do you think it can kind of exploit those divisions to the degree that it can stay in power, or is it still ultimately doomed, do you think?
Well, as far as we know, I mean, President Assad is in power. His government is intact. His diplomatic operators, they're still there. The government is doing their best, even till now. I mean, 3.5 years of a civil war, and government civil servants and government workers, they still get their salaries on time. In fact, this month they get their salaries 6 days before because of the Holy Ramadan. The point is, what I meant about ISIS is a proxy, but I didn't mean directly. I meant intelligence can infiltrate. Intelligence can direct. I'm not talking about the man who is holding the Kalashnikov or behind the Doshka. That's a guy, he believes in this idea, which is part of Wahhabist idea coming from Saudi Arabia, destroy all the sectors of Islam before for them to prevail, as we see today in Iraq. They destroy a mosque, they destroy the tomb of Ammar bin Yasir. Ammar bin Yasir, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told him he will believe he will go to heaven. I mean, as Ammar bin Yasir. I mean, that is a friend of the Prophet Muhammad. For ISIS to come and destroy his tomb, it's nothing to do with the Shia, nothing to do with the Kurds and this. And secondly, in Syria, we never grew up to believe in minorities and majorities. We believed always minorities and majorities make you like a herdle of sheep. You know, we are all Syrians. We belong to the Syrian soil. We will defend Syria till our death. Syria for us is a civilized, I mean, base of civilization. Syria for us is a unique country, and who we believe, I mean, we say whoever drink from Damascus water will never forget that country. And
just let me jump in there, because that vision of society, that's a very, you know, it's something that emerged with the kind of independence of the Arab states. You know, you talk.
Syrian.
Yes, but you can hear Iraqis talk about that in exactly that language. You hear Egyptians talking exactly that kind of language. Is that?
We have different belongs. I mean, we are the head. We are the one who produced something called Arab.
Yeah, but that wave of Arab nationalism, which resulted in decolonisation, that was a very, very powerful idea. Do you think, Bill, that it's run its course?
I do think one shouldn't lose sight of the Ba'ath Party, as a matter of fact. So I think both in Iraq and in Syria, the Ba'ath Party was, in fact, a very good protector of minorities, as it happens. So I think Christians had a good deal under the Ba'ath secularist regime in Iraq. You know, as the Christians have had under the Ba'ath secularist regime in Syria. And I think there's no question but that the West, led by the United States, decided that these regimes had to go. And of course, we're now living through the consequence of that, as we are in Libya, as we speak. And I think whoever it was earlier on who mentioned the Shia Crescent, you know, I think that is a real factor, because, you know, in my opinion, the British handed southern Iraq over to Iran very shortly after 2004. So that's how it's been since then. I think the present regime...
The British were essentially military defeated.
And the Baghdad regime has been effectively a Shia regime under very strong influence from Iran. And this goes right the way through into Lebanon. And so I think that is the nature of the conflict taking place at the moment. And of course, an awful lot of people thinking they're going to be much worse off under any other regime than the one prevailing.
Bilal, I mean, I know that you've had some experience with the resistance in Syria, not ISIS, but other groups. Do you think that they now are they being ground down now between the regime and ISIS? Do you think that they have the capacity to take on the regime effectively any longer?
Well, they've been doing it. This issue, this crisis with ISIS didn't start just a week or 2 or months ago. This actually started as soon as ISIS split with the Al-Qaeda affiliate Jabhat al-Nusra. So it started about in approximately March of 2013. And there's been resistance from ISIS ever since that time. But if you look at the situation now, yes, the resistance groups have to fight the Assad regime, and they also have to fight the Islamic State or so-called Islamic State forces as well. So this has made things very, very difficult for them. But it appears that they are able to continue the fight. But there's going to have to be some type of change somewhere in there if it's going to be successful. I believe that the membership that are within ISIS, and I'm talking about the general membership, they've really got to wake up at some point and just say, hey, let me rethink exactly what it is that I'm fighting for. And let me ask myself if I'm really accomplishing that. Not just to say that we're taking some territory. Am I really accomplishing the ideals that I left my house from in Egypt or from the UK or from the US or whatever the case is? Am I accomplishing that? Now, when that happens, I think that you're going to start to see a change on the ground, because having experience with some of these people, I can tell you that I believe that a good deal of them are sincere, but a lot of them fell prey to the rhetoric, to the fancy videos, and such like that. And
okay, I'm gonna have to bring you to a close there, I'm afraid, because we've reached the end of this episode of Analysis. I'd like to thank my guests and, of course, you at home for watching. Please tune in again for future discussions, and don't forget you can keep up with the discussion by following us on Twitter at the address on the screen below, or by following the Islam Channel Current Affairs team on Facebook. Until next time, thanks very much for watching and good night.